long ball is going to go for a touchdown. The game's over. Webster Slaughter.
Metcalf will go for the score. Unbelievable.
45-40. Run, William, run. He's got blockers in front. 5. Touchdown. Joshua Cribbs turns disaster into a score.
Sight wants it all on this one for Logan, and he is there.
Jim Brown to the 30. Jim Brown is going to go in for another touchdown.
The Cleveland Browns select Baker Mayfield.
Wow.
It is Baker Mayfield.
I woke up feeling dangerous.
Hello, Cleveland. Welcome to another episode of the 1085 Gridiron Podcast. I am your host, Anthony Joki. We have a fantastic episode for you today. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Jack McCurry of the North Coast Sports. How you doing today, Jack?
Doing good, man. This is episode number 90. We're only 10 away from our 100th episode. That's crazy to think.
I know. When you and I started this year and a half ago, maybe a little bit longer than a year and a half ago, I can't believe we've gotten to this point already. And we should hit our 100th episode just past the end of the season. And I'll tell you what, I'm excited for that one. I know we're going to try to make that one as big as possible. But right now, this episode is our biggest because we have a very special and fantastic guest. He is Benjamin Allbright, who Cleveland Browns fans that are on Twitter know fairly well. He always seems to be breaking some news when it comes to Cleveland or getting the good rumors out there. When it comes to head coach or firings and free agency and whatnot. So we're very glad to have Ben on with us. And Jack took about 20 minutes to sit down with Ben. And Jack, what can we expect from this interview here with Ben?
Ben is one of the most knowledgeable football insiders I think there is. Outside of Schefter and Rappaport and some of those top names, Ben's right up there with them. He's always breaking news. What you're going to get out of this interview is essentially he's going to tell you some inside information on the coaching search. Obviously, a lot we've heard, but he's going to tell you who the front runners are for that job as of right now. And we get into the game, and he gives his take on what he thought the Browns have done this season and what should be an interesting matchup this week against Denver. Yeah,
it's going to be a very interesting matchup, that's for sure. And it's an exciting matchup because it's another primetime game for the Browns, and this is the second one that we've had this season. They won the first one, the Thursday night game against the Jets. So hopefully they can have a repeat performance and win this one as well. And it should be a fun Saturday night. It's weird having football on Saturday night. It's kind of thrown off my whole week in terms of us recording and whatnot. But after the interview, Jack and I will break down the game into more detail for you guys. And here's our interview with Benjamin Allbright.
Joining me now on the 1085 Gridiron Podcast, man speaks for himself. If you know him on Twitter. He is one of the best when it comes to news in the National Football League. He's out of Denver, Colorado. And it's Benjamin Allbright. He's on Twitter at Allbright NFL. Ben, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on the show.
No, doing pretty well. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm doing well. First of all, happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Obviously, I wanted to get you on the show because you are in Denver. You cover the Broncos for the most part, and, of course, the Browns are playing the Broncos this weekend in Denver. To talk about the Browns first, what's your opinion on how this season has gone so far for Cleveland?
Well, I think this season for fans, the casual fan, maybe a little bit more exciting. The Browns have been more competitive, been in more football games. I think from my perspective, it's a bit disappointing because when Hugh and Todd Haley were still there, they were losing football games they should have won. Whether that's the referee debacle against Oakland or the tie or the game in the rain, whatever. There's 3 or 4 wins that this team could have picked up and be in line to compete for a division title. And while they're still competitive for the division, in December, I think that, obviously they need a little help, but that's got to be disappointing relative to what could have been. But then again, like I said, I think fans have to be excited that it's December and we're still talking about the potential of the playoffs for the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, it's crazy because, when Hugh and Haley got fired, I thought the season was just going to spiral out of control. It's going to be another typical season. Now, like you said, we're sitting here 3 weeks to go and still have a shot at the wild card and perhaps even the division if Pittsburgh and Baltimore somehow have an epic collapse. But now I think fans here are kicking themselves thinking like if the refs would have spotted us that yard in Oakland, or we wouldn't have tied, or if the kicker wouldn't have failed in New Orleans, we could be right now controlling our own destiny. But, honestly, it's a good season in my book. I predicted 6 wins. They're sitting at 5-7-1. Obviously, we could have more, but, I thought this is a good season for the Browns, and it's turning around in the right direction, I think, for the organization.
Yeah, I think the future is bright. I think you're looking at, like I said, again, the team that's competitive now. They're in football games. I only think there's 1 or 2 maybe that they've been out of this season, as far as that goes. But they've been in football games late. That's what you want. You want that. You want to be competitive. You want to be a team that, is still in games late, gives yourself the opportunity to win. And that's not something that, the Browns have been in previous years, but, they're back to it. They've got the right quarterback. The offensive line is really starting to shape up. They found the running back. The skill position players are still raw out there in the pass game, but, they've kind of come together a little bit. And then on the defensive side of the ball, the Browns have a pretty good defense. They need to shore up the linebacking core a little bit, but beyond that, they've got some good edge rushers. They've got disruption up the middle. They've got good corners that can play in man. The safety position looks like it's finally got the right guys. So, I think it's really more of a preview of what's to come. Is the team on a rising trajectory? And if you look around the division that they're in, that's a good thing because you got the Bengals who are bad. You've got the Steelers and the Ravens who appear on a downward trajectory. So, in the next year or two, this could be Cleveland's division.
Yeah, definitely. And you were talking about how a lot of things are starting to fall in place. The one thing that's really missing is a future head coach. And, the talk around Cleveland right now is should the Browns keep Greg Williams as head coach, Freddie Kitchens as offensive coordinator, keep them intact in one form or another. I know, Ben, you've been, dropping hints on Twitter about potential head coaching candidates for the Browns. My first question is, do you think Greg Williams has coached himself into a position where he could be the permanent head coach going forward?
I don't think so. I don't. I think that Greg is, has done a wonderful job this season kind of stabilizing things and getting a professional atmosphere there. But the stench of Bountygate, that albatross is still hanging around his neck, and I highly doubt that he's ever going to be a head coach again. I think that's part of the reason he was kind of chosen as the interim this year is because he's got that thing, and it's a built-in excuse not to keep him as the head coach. I think that continuity is important, and I think that you could achieve continuity by bringing in any number of different guys and moving him back to defensive coordinator, whether that's McCarthy, Bruce Arians, whoever. I think that you've kind of got a ready-made plug-and-play scenario with either one of those two, and I would suggest that at this point those would be the leaders of the clubhouse.
And with those guys you just mentioned, McCarthy and Arians, would they be would they consider bringing or keeping Freddie Kitchens on as offensive coordinator, or would they want to bring in their own guy?
Well, I think so. I think you kind of have to. I think he's the guy who's been in Baker's ear. He's had success. I think if you're a smart coach, smart head coach, you realize that, you're really kind of being a CEO type here. You're the team that's got a guide and game plan. But, these other two coaches, Greg Williams and Kitchens, have really kind of molded these two units into what they are, and you want to continue that. So you may bring in some guys that you're familiar with you want to bring in, but I think you kind of want to bring those two because they've established a credibility.
You did bring up Mike McCarthy, and there was some national reports this past weekend that pumped the brakes on McCarthy for sure being the next head coach because of the relationship with him and Dorsey. Obviously, it's a great thing to allude to that McCarthy will be the next guy, and I know you've hinted at it on Twitter. Do you think it's a deadlock possibility that he'll be the next head coach, or do you think that John Dorsey will interview multiple candidates?
Well, I think both can be true. I think what I was trying to say was that Mike McCarthy is one of the strongest candidates for the job. Not that he would necessarily get it, but he's getting very strong consideration and will get very strong consideration. The idea that he's not going to or is a lock, neither one of those two statements are true. And the other part of that is John Dorsey's going to interview more than one person, whether he hires one or not. So that's the other part I think that's a little disconcerting with some of the replies that I get on things like that, is that, well, some people extrapolating things or putting words in my mouth on that. I think Mike McCarthy and Bruce Arians are the leaders in the clubhouse. Does that mean that somebody can't come in and wow them? No. But that means that those two guys are guys that are definitely, in the running, and I would keep an eye on that.
Outside of those two, who are other names that you're hearing tying to Cleveland?
Well, those really are the names. The other people that have been suggested, it's not going to be Josh McDaniels. That's just laughable. Matt Campbell was in the running, but he signed an extension at Iowa State. Lincoln Riley is not coming to Cleveland. If he takes any NFL job, it would be Dallas, and I doubt he takes that one. So, there's the idea that some of these names that are out there that are being floated are just not accurate at all. Josh McDaniels is not going to be at all. If he goes anywhere, it'd be probably Green Bay or stay in New England. Looking around at some of the other names that are out there, I think Pete Carmichael's name isn't coming up enough. The OC of the New Orleans Saints, he's a guy that could be in consideration. I don't think that Cleveland is going to be a team that goes after Shane Waldron or Zach and Press Taylor, but those are just names that are going to get some run for offensive coordinator and head coach gigs. With some of these teams as well.
What about Eric Bieniemy out of Kansas City?
That name keeps getting thrown at me, and that's the weirdest thing to me, because Eric Bieniemy is just the run game coordinator in Kansas City. He's got the title of offensive coordinator, but Andy Reid is the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. Eric Bieniemy is the run game coordinator, and all this stuff with that's going on up there, that's a byproduct of Pat Mahomes, not the system. And Pat Mahomes isn't coming with Bieniemy if he goes somewhere. So, I've seen Eric Bieniemy at CU doing, as an offensive coordinator, and I don't understand why people are, trying to get. Maybe they just see the Mahomes numbers and they're going after that. I don't think Eric Bieniemy is going to be it at all.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's the whole, Mahomes is lighting up the league. Let's find that next offensive guy and hope that he's the next Sean McVay, and maybe they're looking at Bieniemy as that guy. One final question on the head coaching search. People are talking about Bieniemy. Is there any way that the Browns would interview Freddie Kitchens to be head coach, even though he's got a small sample size as an offensive coordinator?
Well, let me ask you this. If you've got somebody coaching for you who's doing something very well, do you think it's wise to promote him past that point to something else and then have to start over with that thing that he was doing well? I don't know why you'd want to promote Freddie Kitchens to head coach. He's doing well as the offensive coordinator, so the idea should be to try to keep him there. Personally, I don't think that he's going to be. He may get a courtesy interview. I think the Browns' plan is to bring a CEO type in and then, try to keep him and Greg on as OC and DC.
All right. Well, let's move on to the game. And, obviously Denver 6-7 this year. They're still in the wild card hunt as well, just like Cleveland. Ben, what's your quick thoughts on how this season has gone? Has it gone according to what you thought it was, or are they haven't exceeded expectations, or what's your take on the season so far?
Well, I think you look at Denver. I think part of that has to be colored by the fact that Kansas City exceeded all my expectations. Kansas City was a team I thought would take a little bit of a step back, going from Alex Smith to Pat Mahomes, and boy, did they not. I was way off on that, and so what that's really done is kind of cut into Denver's win total. I kind of had them as a team to be flirting with that last wild card spot. I guess they are kind of flirting with that last wild card spot, although the loss to San Fran effectively removes them from it. They need a ton of help to be able to get it. It's nearly impossible. So when you look at it that way, I would say I was close on what Denver is. I overestimated them. They've had a lot of injuries. Obviously, they traded Demaryius Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders is hurt. Their first, and second, and third string tight ends are all gone now. The offensive line, they're starting 3 backups. At times, it's been 4 backups along the offensive line this season. On the defensive side of the ball, Chris Harris has been hurt. Brandon Marshall has been hurt. So a lot of injuries have taken their toll on the team. But overall, they've had the players to make the plays. They've been competitive in certain games. Just coaching has held them back. You've got a coaching staff that is way too much a slave to the analytics. instead of feeling game flow and what you're supposed to do, situationally. I think great coaching. Here's the thing about and Cleveland, I think, is especially sensitive to this because of the Sashi thing. But analytics is a system to make you more efficient. And a great coach takes those numbers, takes those analytics, and fuses those in and has a knack and a feel for when to use those and when to do those things in game, when to take those odds and how to interpret those odds situationally. And this coaching staff looks at those numbers as absolute truth, which is why they get caught doing things they shouldn't be doing. They continue to pass the ball on first down, run on second down, and then we'll see on third. They tell you that the analytics says you've got to throw to score points, but the strength of the team is running through Philip Lindsay. And it's bad move after bad move. They didn't challenge on a Tim Patrick catch that would have saved them 2.5 minutes against the Niners, but then did challenge on a 3rd and 2 that they obviously weren't going to get, and cost themselves a timeout down the stretch and cost them the game. So, it's been that noise all season. Passing on field goals in an effort to try to get touchdowns and then turning the ball over. It's been the same thing all year. So, bad coaching has held a team that could probably have 2 or 3 more wins than it does back.
So safe to say it will take a miracle finish for Vance Joseph to save his job.
It was always going to take the playoffs for him to save his job, and while they did put together a little 3-game win streak there, the reality is that win streak would never have happened if the other teams had been coaching the way they should have. The Chargers blew it when Phillip Rivers threw an incomplete pass inside of 2 minutes instead of just kneeling the football. If he knelt the football, the game would have been over. He threw an incomplete pass at the feet of his receiver on the screen, allowing the Broncos enough time to put together a desperation drive. There's other things going on here. I don't think Vance keeps his job. I don't see how he can, and the players are kind of starting to grumble about the offensive defensive coordinator. So I just don't see any way the staff survives.
How has Case Keenum performed for you all? I haven't caught a lot of Denver games, but from what I've seen for the most part, I see he's been about as advertised as what he was back in L.A. and what he was coming out of Houston.
I think he's better than that. I think he's a decent quarterback. He's middle of the road. He's not a great quarterback. He never was going to be. But, I think the expectation level in Denver is probably the problem. In Denver, the expectation is John Elway and Peyton Manning. And so when you get a Kyle or a Case Keenum, a guy who's serviceable and you can win with if you play to their strengths, it's difficult to do that because you see the drop-off in quarterback play. Case, you can win with Case. He's the number 2 quarterback in the NFL off play action over the last 2 years. The problem is the Broncos barely use play action, and they try to pass to set up the run rather than run to set up the pass, and so they just don't play to his strengths. Case, like I said, Case is Andy Dalton. He's a middle of the road guy, but if you play to his strengths, you can win football games.
One guy that's exceeded expectations in Denver has definitely have to be undrafted rookie Phillip Lindsay. I don't think too many people outside of Colorado heard of this kid after the draft, but he's closing in on 1,000 yards. He's averaging 6 yards a carry, and obviously he will not win Offensive Rookie of the Year because that's probably going to go to Baker or Saquon Barkley. But Phillip Lindsay has really opened some eyes across the NFL world, I think, this year.
Yeah, he's number 4 in the league in total rushing yards, and he's done it on about 40 carries less than Saquon Barkley. He's number 1 in the league in yards per carry. He's a great, phenomenal running back. They just, they don't play to his strengths either. They try to pass to set up the run, and they'll give him chunk yardage stuff late when people are playing soft instead of running through him, and getting him out to the edge on plays early, getting defenses going side to side so they can take advantage. And that's been a recurring theme all year. I think Lindsay should be in the talk for Rookie of the Year. He should finish no lower than 3rd. He's certainly been a dominant performer when he's been on the field, but he had 2 games this year where he only got 4 carries. So they're just not doing well with getting him the touches that they should. They don't use him in the screen game like they should, and then again that falls back to coaching.
Outside of him, I see Sanders is out, obviously. Jeff Hireman's out, Jake Butt, and Cortland Sutton's questionable for Saturday. Who's another person on offense that the Browns are going to have to game plan against on Saturday?
Well, the only one you really have to worry about is the 2 besides Lindsay. Freeman will come in for a couple of short yardage carries as far as that kind of stuff goes. But really, who you have to watch out for is on the offensive now is Tim Patrick, who's a big receiver. It's 6'4", and he's got some speed and some range. And then Deshaun Hamilton will be the guy between the 20s, who'll be the possession guy as far as that goes. I mean, all these guys are first-year players, or with the exception of Lacoste, who caught like a ball back in 2015, are first-year rookie-type guys. So you don't really have to game plan much of these guys. You just got to kind of, with a guy like Patrick, you got to make sure he doesn't get his body on you, or he'll get up there. But other than that, Tim Patrick's really the only guy you really need to kind of worry about.
And on the defensive side of the ball, obviously Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are going to be a huge test for Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard and the entire Browns offensive line. Chubb, he's closing in on that rookie sack record. Has he lived up to expectations being the 5th pick in the draft?
I think so. I mean, if you're closing in on the rookie sack record, you're doing something right.
Right.
I think it does help that, you're opposite Von Miller a little bit, but, Chubb's kind of been his own man and done his own thing. And, he's a guy you could drop back into coverage too. He's not just one-dimensional coming downhill like Von Miller is. So, I think that's kind of helpful as well. Allows them to get a little creative with what they do, in designing things, so that can help. And then, the fact that you've got a rotation there, you can pull both those guys off the field, put Shaq Barrett and Shane Ray in, and you really don't have, a huge drop-off in terms of pass rushing productivity. So I think that's part of it, allowing them to stay fresh and do those kind of things.
Do you think Cleveland has any regrets passing up on Bradley Chubb for Denzel Ward, looking back 8 months later?
I don't think so. I said at the time I didn't think they would. That was one of those things that, you already have guys that I think fit those roles. You already have Myles Garrett. You already have Manuel Agba. You needed to get man coverage corners, and Ward was a turnover machine early in the season. So, I don't think they have any regrets.
Looking at the Broncos secondary, they have struggled without Chris Harris. Is there any guys back there in that secondary that the Browns should be focusing in on as a guy that they should try to avoid, or is this secondary wide open for the Browns to unleash the passing attack against?
Well, the secondary isn't bad. There's a couple players in there that aren't very good. Bradley Roby is not very good. So, you probably want to pick on him. Really, the key to having success passing against the Broncos has been getting the tight end involved. They don't have anybody that can cover the tight end. And that's been their Achilles heel all year. We saw Kittle get 210 yards in the first half last week. They just don't have anybody that can cover athletic tight ends because Josie Jewell and Todd Davis are downhill linebackers. So, if you really want to open up the pass game, get the tight end open up the middle early. That'll cause the safeties to shrink in the middle linebacker, drift back a little bit, and then you'll be able to pass to the outside, get those quick passing, rhythm passing stuff going with Landry, and then try to get Callaway deep.
Do you want to make a prediction for Saturday's game?
Browns win.
Sounds good to me. Before we let you go, I just have one question because I know you are one of the best when it comes to evaluating quarterbacks on Twitter for the NFL draft. And, of course, Ohio's got number 7, Dwayne Haskins, who may or may not declare for the draft. He says he's not announcing it till after the Rose Bowl. From what you've seen so far, what's your quick analysis on Dwayne Haskins, and where do you think he could be projected if he does declare for the draft? I've already seen him in the top 10 and a few other people's mock drafts already, even though it's really early.
Yeah, he's probably going to go top 10. He's quarterback 1A or 1B, just depending on where you have Justin Herbert, and assuming Herbert comes out. He's a guy that's got athleticism, got the tools, got the big time pedigree. It's going to be good for him. Overall, he was a little rough at times with the mid and deep game. It was just really just, short to deep type stuff. The Urban Meyer offense, those quarterbacks tend to take a little while to translate, in the NFL. You go back and look at guys that come out of that offense. Alex Smith took a little while to get going. Dak Prescott came out of the same offense, although it was Mississippi State with Mullen, but similar offense. Those guys can take a little while to get going sometimes. Overall, I think Haskins will be successful in the league, but he's probably 1A, 1B. You're going to see him go top 12.
Is it a lock that Herbert's going to go going to go to the draft? Because I've seen reports that he will go back to Oregon. It's no final decision yet, right?
No final decision yet. He could go back to Oregon. The key there is his brother, is coming to play at Oregon. And so he kind of likes the idea of getting to play with his brother one more year, kind of thing in college. And I think that, there are people advising him both ways. Some people telling him that the college life and the family thing is, only comes around once, so take it. And then there are people that are like, well, the money only comes once, take it. And so it's, he's got a decision to make.
Well, Ben, I thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. It's very much appreciated. Is there anything you want to plug?
No, man, I'm good.
All right, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. We hope to have you on again soon.
Absolutely. Take care.
All right. I hope you guys really enjoyed that interview. Ben, we really thank Ben for joining us or joining Jack and for about 20 minutes or so, and giving all that insight about what he had to say. And I'll tell you what, we want to do more interviews for you guys, and I think this is a step in the right direction of getting some awesome information. And I know, Jack, you're very thrilled to have been able to sit down with Ben for 20 minutes or so and get some good inside information.
Yeah, definitely. I've been waiting to sit down and talk to him for a long time. We tried to get him in the spring during free agency and the draft, but he was obviously really busy at the time. And, he's a most-wanted guy when it comes to NFL information, but we do thank Ben for coming on. Hopefully he will come on with us again in the future.
Absolutely. And, when it comes to the game this Saturday night, we're going to go into a little bit more detail about that. Jack, when you look at this game, Denzel Ward may play. Greg Williams said today that he'll have to practice Thursday in order for him to have a chance at playing on Saturday. He has progressed well. If Denzel Ward is not able to play, I know Denver has traded away their top receiver. They're hurt across the tight ends. They're down their first, second, and third tight end. So when you look at this Denver team and the Browns potentially not having Denzel Ward, how do you think this defense is going to be able to stack up against the Denver offense?
Well, I mean, when you look at it, and we talked about this with Ben, outside of Phillip Lindsay right now, there's not much there on the Broncos offense. And if you're going to stop the Broncos offense, what you're going to have to do is stop Phillip Lindsay because, like Benjamin said, Case Keenum's one of the best quarterbacks in play action in the National Football League. And if you can't get the run game going, it's hard to get that play action passing game go. So, obviously there's a lot of what-if guys, potential guys at the wide receiver position. Cortland Sutton is questionable. Who knows if he's going to play? He was limited in practice on Wednesday. But, if they can shut down Lindsey, then I think this Browns defense is going to make some plays and be able to get after Keenum and hopefully force some turnovers.
Yeah, it was weird last week. The Browns only forced one turnover, but it was when it mattered most. They seem to have, they started out the season on a complete tear with forcing turnovers, but that seems to have quieted down quite a little bit. Obviously, they're going to focus on the run and stopping Phillip Lindsay. Is this defensive line and the linebacking core as it is constructed now, do you think that they have a good shot at stopping Lindsay? Because they did have a real tough time stopping McCaffrey last week.
Yeah, they've had a tough time this season. They're 28th against the run. They're giving up 4.7 yards per carry. And Phillip Lindsay's no joke. I mean, he's averaging almost 6 yards a carry. And like I told Ben, no one saw this coming out of an undrafted rookie when the Broncos picked him up after the draft. But he has taken the NFL world by storm. He's helping the Broncos offense. And I agree with Ben when he said that, Lindsey should finish no worse than third in Rookie of the Year voting. I tweeted it out on Tuesday that if I had to rank right now, it'd be Baker number 1, Saquon Barkley number 2, and Phillip Lindsay number 3 because he's been very impressive so far this year.
Yeah, he has been impressive, and hopefully, the Browns have had a real rough time stopping the run over the last few weeks, and hopefully that's something they can piece together because the Denver offense is really one dimensional. Case Keenum is an average quarterback at best. I know Ben said he's Andy Dalton when used correctly, and but they really don't have any receivers right now. Like you mentioned, Courtland Sutton is questionable for the game on Saturday. They're down quite a few tight ends as well. So the offensive line has struggled because they've been dealing with injuries as well. So I'm hoping that this Browns defense can really step up. And when you have a primetime game, that's going to be a interesting environment, that's for sure, on Saturday night in Denver. So hopefully the defense can step up. But the offense, they've been on a complete tear recently, obviously fueled by Baker Mayfield and installing Freddie Kitchens as the offensive coordinator after Hugh and Todd Haley were fired. When you look at this offense versus the Denver defense, this kind of reminds me of the Houston game a couple weeks ago. They have a couple guys over there in Von Miller and Bradley Chubb that can get after the quarterback. Bradley Chubb has 12 sacks as a rookie. He's has not taken any prisoners in terms of offensive linemen. So, they're really going to have to focus on him, and they're going to have to pay attention to Von Miller as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those two combined have 25.5 sacks, which is unbelievable for a tandem. Greg Robinson and Chris Hubbard, that entire offensive line's in for a tough matchup. The interior of the offensive line's been phenomenal, especially J.C. Tretter, who has dealt with a high ankle sprain and may even re-aggravated it last weekend against Carolina. I know at one point Kyle Callis, the Cleveland native, was warming up, taking snaps, getting ready to go in, but Tretter kept fighting. And that's, that takes some... It takes a lot to get out there and play despite that high ankle sprain. I know it was tough for Myles Garrett, but to see Tretter do it and play through it, that takes a lot of guts, and, kudos to him. But, Robinson and Hubbard, they've been great. Since week 9, the Browns have only allowed 4 QB hits. So kudos to that offensive line. Kudos to Baker for getting the ball out quickly and be able to have the pocket awareness to move around if the pressure comes. And kudos to Freddie Kitchens as well for, designing plays so Baker could get the ball out quickly. So that's what the Browns need to do on Saturday night, is to, have quick plays, screen passes, get design plays to get the ball out quick, because Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are no joke. And if Baker has to sit back in that pocket and wait, it's going to be a rough night for him.
The Browns and Freddie Kitchen have done a great job at doing what other teams have done against Myles Garrett. When Myles Garrett starts to get going, they do everything they can to get the ball out quick. Now, the Browns have been doing that, ever since Kitchens took over, and Baker Mayfield has absolutely thrived in that kind of environment. You mentioned the 4 quarterback hits. This is minus Greg Robinson. It's the same offensive line as the beginning of the year, and there were numerous sacks, numerous quarterback hits, and the scheme change from Haley to Kitchens seems to have corrected that. One of the other things that it has done since Kitchens took over as offensive coordinator, the Browns are 14 of 14 in red zone opportunities and scoring touchdowns. You don't hear of that in the NFL. What does it say to you that since Kitchens took over, they've been able to score 14 out of 14 times when they've entered the red zone?
Kitchens knows when you get in the red zone, that's when if you get down in that situation, the object is to score touchdowns. And, he's had some interesting play calls, and, like the reverse run to Landry that he got a touchdown on Sunday. It's, he knows that that's where you make your money. And he knows that right now he's trying to make his money so that he could secure either an offensive coordinator role here or somewhere else in the National Football League. So not just him, but the players know it as well. Their livelihood is on the line when they get down in the red zone, that they need to come away with touchdowns. And kudos to the Browns. They've been doing just that since in the last few weeks.
All right, looking at this entire game, if there's one major point that'll determine the Browns winning this football game, what does that point to you?
It has to be that they get the running game has to be going. Nick Chubb has to have a monster game. Looking at this Broncos defense, they're 19th against the run. And they give up on average 4.5 yards a carry. So if it comes down to it, I think it comes down to the running game. Can Nick Chubb be that workhorse back that the Browns are depending on against a tough defensive front that is Denver? I mean, if he can do that, the Browns are going to be in a great position to win. Where do you look at as the key to winning this game for Cleveland?
When you have a pass rush like Von Miller and now Bradley Chubb, I think you have to be very efficient in the screen game. The screen game is going to take pressure off of Baker Mayfield. It's going to help out the offensive linemen. So what I need the Browns to do this week, and Freddie Kitchens as well, is to not throw a ton of screens, but they need to use them effectively. And what I mean by effectively, when you get into an obvious passing situation where those guys are coming at you, Von Miller and Bradley Chubb are going to be coming after you. They're going to be coming after your quarterback. That's when you want to use those screens the most. And so what I want to see them do, and what I think is going to be the major point, at least for the Browns offense, to help them score, is they have to use the screen game very effectively on Saturday night.
And with the screen game, I would think one guy that could break out due to the screen game is Duke Johnson. He had a couple good games when Freddie Kitchens first took over the play calling, especially getting against Kansas City. But he's kind of gone quiet the last couple of weeks. Nick Chubb's been more of a receiving back as well as our main rushing back. I would like to see Duke Johnson break out, and this is perfect spot for him, especially, dealing with the personal stuff we had to deal with last week with the death of his grandmother. If he can come back and step up on the national stage and help the Browns win, I think everybody will feel really good about that.
Yeah, I would imagine that there's been a lot weighing on his mind, and, obviously it's tough when you lose someone, and hopefully Duke's family is pulling together and being there for each other and whatnot. I wanted to have this conversation because because we are playing the Broncos and because Bradley Chubb is doing so well. You kind of talked about it a little bit there with Allbright, but do you personally think that the Browns should have taken Bradley Chubb over Denzel Ward? And are you glad that it turned out the way that it did?
I was a Bradley Chubb advocate leading up to the draft, but I always had that in the back of my mind that Denzel Ward would be an option. Was disappointed when they took Denzel Ward at first, but looking back now, I have no regrets because looking at, what we have on that defensive front with Ogunjobi and Agba, and the fact that we can add someone pretty talented to that defensive line in April's draft, I'm good with the pick. Denzel Ward has been phenomenal. He hasn't, people will look and say, well, he doesn't have that many interceptions, and, people just look at the box scores, and that's why you can't do that. And Colin Cowherd said something smart yesterday, and it made a lot of sense. Don't look at the box scores, watch the games. And when you watch the games, you see Denzel Ward makes an impact on that secondary. And then not only him being on the field makes the other teams focus on Terrence Mitchell, makes them focus on TJ Carey. And look, those guys are playing well too. TJ Carey contained Julio Jones. Terrence Mitchell's been an awesome corner, and that I don't think anybody thought when we signed him back in March. So when you look at it, yeah, it would have been nice to see it Myles Garrett and Bradley Chubb as your bookend pass rushers, but we needed a cover corner. We got the best one in Denzel Ward, and the fact that we can add a pass rusher or somebody on that defensive front in April's draft with whatever pick we have, I think it was justified to take Ward like we did with the fourth pick.
Do you think that this defense would perform better if they had Bradley Chubb instead of Denzel Ward, or you think it kind of be an equal production?
I think it'd be equal production. I think we do generate enough pass rush up front for the secondary to be able to make plays. And if obviously if we would have had Bradley Chubb, there would be more pressure and maybe it would lead to more turnovers. But, I mean, when you look at the secondary as a whole with Mitchell, Demarius Randall, Jabril Peppers, Derek Kindred, TJ Carey, and, of course, Denzel Ward, I mean, the secondary's been awesome, and I think we needed that. We needed Denzel Ward because he might not be a vocal leader, but I think he's leading by example, and I think he's making everyone else around him better as well.
You know, to me, the best part about Denzel Ward is that when he's playing, you don't hear his name, and when you don't hear a cornerback's name, that means he's doing something damn good. And it's been quite a while since I've heard his name called. I know he had a little bit of trouble in the Houston game. But, you know, other than that, he's been really solid this season. And I think he's definitely one of the candidates for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think he'll get it. Obviously, Bradley Chubb's probably the leader in the clubhouse in that category. But, you know, when you look at this defense, they needed Denzel Ward a lot more than they needed Bradley Chubb. And I wouldn't be surprised if, you know, you mentioned the draft a little bit, and I won't go on a huge soapbox here because you forbid me from talking draft, but I wouldn't be surprised if they go corner in the first round next year instead of a pass rusher. I wouldn't be surprised at all because they can definitely use one on the other side of Denzel Ward, and it'll be very interesting to see what they do at that point.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, you said that you don't hear Denzel Ward's name often. You know, people knock on Pro Football Focus, but those guys watch the tape, and that's why they come up with the grades they did. Denzel Ward is the 13th best corner in the National Football League this year. So he might not be filling up the box score, and, you know, fans might give him a hard time like that, like they do other players, Real Peppers, for instance. But Ward's making plays. He's a game changer, and the Browns made the right call with the 4th pick. And, you know, we'll talk draft real quick. I know you mentioned a corner.
Yes.
Byron Murphy is a guy that I have my eye on with whatever pick we have in the first round. There, you got my one draft take for the next 4 weeks.
I know. We've been going back and forth in Twitter DMs about talking draft, and you know, you kind of gave me a nice dig on the last podcast when we were talking playoffs, and you're like, well, to think 4 weeks ago you wanted to talk draft. You know, we'll be talking that soon enough, that's for sure. But that'll be after the Browns playoff run that we'll be talking draft.
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Before we get out of here, I suppose we should give our predictions for this game on Saturday night. So if you want to go ahead and give yours.
I got to agree with what Ben said as well. I think the Browns win. You know, they are on a roll right now. We're on prime time again. The last time we were on a primetime game, obviously Baker's debut, and the Browns rallied from being down 14-0 and won the game. But I think, you know, the roll we're on right now, and, you know, they're feeling playoffs. The fans are feeling playoffs. Denver is, you know, kind of on the edge right now. And I think the Browns, you know, they're going to play, even if they don't win, I think they're going to give Denver a fight. But I think they're going to win. They're going to knock Denver officially out of the playoffs, which is going to feel so good for what they did to us 25, 30 years ago. And I think Cleveland wins, and I think they win by double digits. I'm going to go Browns 28, Denver 13.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I'm with you and Ben on this. I think Saturday night is a primetime game, so that's going to be a very raucous environment. And I think the bigger environment that Baker Mayfield is in, the better he performs. And when you go into Denver on a Saturday night, you know, that crowd's going to be pretty amped up. So I think Baker's going to have a huge game on Saturday. I know he likes to feed off of that energy. He's going to get the team to feed off that energy. He's going to be a leader for all those guys, and he's going to carry that football team on Saturday night to another win. I say I'm with you. I think the Browns will win this one by double digits. So I will say the Browns win this one 30-17. I think they're going to win by almost 2 touchdowns on Saturday night.
Yep, Saturday's going to be a good one. You know, after Saturday and then after Sunday, I think the Browns are still going to be in the hunt for the playoffs for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're going to be a hardcore scoreboard watching for sure on Saturday and Sunday, hoping things fall our way. I know over the last couple of years we were doing that, but in the exact opposite, we were hoping for other teams to win so we can get better draft position. It's nice to be on the other side of this and hoping for teams to lose because we do have that. While it's a very tiny chance, we have a chance at making it to the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. But it's fun to be talking about this and talking about the draft, even though we did our little 15 seconds a little bit ago.
Right. You know, we're 2 weeks to Christmas, and we're still talking about playoffs with the Browns. I think that's as good as a Christmas gift that we could all get this year.
Absolutely, man.
All right. If I didn't forget anything, go ahead and plug everything you need to plug.
As always, follow me on Twitter at jmccurrycle. Check out my site, thenorthcoastsports.com, for all the latest on Cleveland sports as well as Ohio State football. And check out my other podcast, the North Coast Sportscast. Going to be dropping a new episode Wednesday night, so it'll be available by the time you guys listen to this episode of 1085. So go give it a listen. It's available everywhere, and follow us on Twitter at NC Sportscast.
Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Anthony Joki, J-O-K-I. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and on Facebook at 1085 Gridiron. We recently started to put out some kind of like highlight videos of the show on Twitter and on Facebook, so be sure to check those out. And they're kind of key points that we talked about or some key quotes that have come across our podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy those videos. They seem to be doing really well, so we will definitely be continuing to pump those out. You can find the podcast on pretty much any platform that you listen to podcasts on, including Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, and iHeartRadio. Be sure to subscribe, review, and rate our podcast. We absolutely appreciate it. Any constructive criticism is always welcome. And with all that, as we get on out of here, the Browns face Denver on Saturday night, and it's time for some more payback of some of that awful stuff that happened there in the late 80s. And as always, go Browns.